Good. Oh. All right, come on, let's get you. So I grew up in Afghanistan during the Russian occupation, and as a child, I remember my father being gone a lot. And the subject of my father's whereabouts was somewhat taboo in our household because my mother told us we were never to ask about him, so we never did. And sometimes I wondered if he cared about me. Growing up during the war was difficult because there were bomb strikes or missile attacks on a daily basis. In fact, there is this distinct whistling noise that a missile makes right before it's about to hit its target. And sometimes they'd be so close that you could hear that. Those of us fortunate enough to be American citizens often see the issue of immigration as a problem of statistics. But those seeking legal status see it as a family problem, one that could save their lives. If we want to improve our immigration system, we must listen to people and stories that remind us what America means to those who have not yet taken it for granted. A New Home, a true story by Dory Simodzai. So my parents were pretty desperate to leave the country, but they couldn't because the government, they put a lockdown on all of our visas. They needed everyone to stay and fight the war for them. So after a daring escape, my parents and brother and I, we all migrated to the US on forged papers, and we asked for political asylum, which meant that we could stay here temporarily while they reviewed our case. So they gave us driver's licenses, work permits, social security cards, things like that. And all of us started working. And fast forward 5 years in our lives, I mean, they're so normal that the biggest thing on my mind at the time was like how I could get my mom to extend my curfew. And so one day I'm working at my first job at the men's warehouse, and I get this call from my dad, and he told me to come home immediately because we had a letter from immigration. And for those of you who are fortunate enough to not be familiar with the immigration system, they don't send you regular updates like, hey, still thinking about you, haven't forgotten about you all. And so on the day of our appointment, we drive about 45 minutes to downtown Los Angeles into this big government building. And upstairs there is an immigration officer who's waiting for us, and he guided us into this room. And we felt like we were in the wrong place. I mean, the people there were visibly upset. And so this guy says, just sit and wait until you hear your last name. Okay. And after a while, my dad asked me to find out how long this is going to take, so I get up and I go to the same officer, and I was like, hey, do you know how long this appointment might take? Because, my dad, he has to get back to work. And he says, oh, your dad will go back to work, just not in this country. So I sat down and I told my dad this, and he just lost all the color on his face. And suddenly he was hunched over, he was grabbing his chest, he was visibly in some kind of pain, so I went back to the same guy and I was like, hey, do you think I could use your phone? Because my dad's not doing too well right now. And he said no. So I was like, okay, can I use the bathroom? And he lets me. So I opened up these double doors and I'm trying to find a phone so I could dial our attorney's number. See, our attorney was really pissing me off right now. I mean, we didn't even have money for food sometimes. But the one thing we always wanted to make sure we had money for was an attorney, and so for her to not be here right now, and so this girl picks up the phone, and she sounds like she's about, 18 years old, and I'm asking her to just put our attorney on the phone, and she keeps refusing. I'm telling her, look, this is an emergency, just please put Dodie on the phone! So I hear Jodi's voice, and I'm explaining to her that something is wrong with my dad. And they're not letting us what she tells me? She tells me to just sit tight and she's gonna see what she can do. And so after about 45 minutes, a man walks in and he calls our last name. So all four of us get up and we're following him. We're not sure where, but we're following him, and he guides us into this room that is so small that only my dad and I can fit inside. And there's this man who's working behind the desk, and he just handed us a piece of paper that said our visa had been extended for 3 months so that we could get my dad some medical help. So at the end of 3 months, we go back to our final appointment, this time with our attorney, and I notice that it's a different judge who's sitting there. He's an older gentleman, and he looks a lot more intense. And so this guy, he goes on with our attorney for a while, and then he turns his attention to my dad, and after asking some basic questions, he asks if my dad is a translator, and my dad says my daughter will translate for us. And so this judge, he turns his attention to me, and he says, "Young lady, whatever I say to you, you tell him exactly, nothing more, nothing less. And whatever he tells you, you tell me exactly, nothing more, nothing less." I agree. And so this judge, he starts asking my dad questions, really demeaning questions like, do I understand correctly that you and your family came here on forged papers? And my dad says, well, yes, and then he goes into this long explanation, but the judge cuts him off and says, I don't care about the explanation, I just want to hear yes or no. So this goes on for a while, back and forth, and it is not going well at all. And finally, the judge says, we here in the United States don't give citizenship to people who break the law. We can't, and I won't. And I see my dad rising out of his seat, and he starts unbuckling his belt, at which point I'm thinking he has completely lost his mind. I'm not sure what he's doing, but he lifts up his shirt on the right side, looks at the judge, and in his native language says, "This is what the communists did to me." And he's pointing at a 5-inch knife scar. And then he turns around a little and pushes his pants down and says, "This is what the communists did to me." And he's pointing at 3 gunshot wounds. And then he takes his shoes off and he takes his socks off and he says, "This is what the communists did to me." And he's pointing at his toenails, which they had tried to take out with pliers. And I remember thinking, I know I'm hearing what I'm hearing, but it wasn't registering because I'm translating all these horrible things, but also learning for the first time about my dad's whereabouts. All those times, years ago, when I didn't know where my dad was, wondering if he cared about me, he was in prison being tortured. And so this judge comes back after about an hour, and he starts walking towards my dad, and my dad gives his hand to the judge, and the judge puts a stamp in it. And together they stamp our papers. And when they move their hands, it reads, "Asylum granted." It took us 18 years from the day that we got here for me to be granted American citizenship. And it is through my 2 children, my 2-year-old son and my unborn child still in my womb, that I will make sure that this gratitude that overflows in my heart will continue to live on long after I am gone.